Hey guys, Omni here. Yesterday was D&D night, and this morning was spent catching up on the boys, so hopefully that will be posted sometime today. I'm still fighting the copyrights now as we speak, but that said, that's why we're a little late getting around to this breakdown for episode 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this episode was, I don't know, cathartic. You know, brought a lot of things full circle and confirmed a lot of our suspicions, and I just really enjoyed the episode, and I'm very curious to see how the finale rounds out next week. But guys, let's go ahead and check out what Eric Voss over at New Rockstars has found in this week's episode. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Obi-Wan Kenobi episode 5, which finally reunites Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen in pre-Attack of the Clones flashbacks, which is really great until you realize this is also the face who kills even the younglings. As always, there were so many subtle visual details, deeper layers of meaning, so we gotta break down this episode shot by shot for everything that you might have missed. And a reminder that the best way to support New Rockstars is to get our Empire's Most Wanted shirt over at NewRockstarsMerch.com. Getting one of these gives you the added option to write in a custom shout out that will appear in our Star Wars after show WikiLeaks. The episode opens back on Coruscant sometime before Attack of the Clones. We know that because Anakin still has the blue lightsaber hilt that he used before it was busted in the Geonosis factory in Attack of the Clones, and he has shorter hair with a Padawan braid, and yeah, an arm still intact. Also, this is the same exact terrace of the Jedi Temple where we opened episode 1 of this series, where the first Jedi youngling we saw, our suspicions confirmed this episode, Reva, the third sister.
Put that together.
In this case, the shot of the city pulling back from the green hedges is in daytime, contrasting the nighttime of the previous shot. So this flashback is more of a pleasant memory, at least at first, before the night comes. The shot from Anakin's perspective has been angled a bit so that different high-rises are in frame, now including this one on the far right, 500 Republica, the Senate residence building where, at this point in history, Padme would be living as a young senator from Naboo. When we catch up with Anakin and Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones, he says he hasn't spoken to Padme since Phantom Menace. So this now tells us that he spent all those years longing for his royal dream girl in her tower. This shot echoes his son Luke's future longing as he gazed out upon another horizon. These Skywalker boys, they just love too long. Anakin teases,
"Was beginning to think you weren't coming, Master."
Good. Then maybe I stand more of a chance this time.
a meaningful exchange. Obi-Wan says that since Anakin could not sense his arrival, late or otherwise, Kenobi's intuition might be more sharply attuned today than his Padawan's is. It also tells us that Anakin might have bested the old man in their more recent sparring sessions. Ewan and Hayden have been de-aged, but just a little bit to remove some wrinkles on their faces, and in Hayden's face to tighten up his chin a little bit. And you can see that artificiality specifically on Hayden's smirk. And that's because mouths, smiles, and talking are just always the hardest for animators who render to be photorealistic. But really, it was just awesome to see these two together again.
Yeah, I didn't even pay attention to it, man. I was just sucked into the scene.
In one hand, Anakin with two hands, inverting the defensive posture Obi-Wan had to take while fighting Vader in episode 3. Vader in that duel only using one hand. This memory echoes in the mind of Darth Vader as he's on his Star Destroyer, the Devastator. This flashback is interwoven throughout the episode, structuring it as a present lesson that both men are still learning from and having a dialogue with. Vader tells the third sister, "Kneel."
Before Zod. Sorry. Wrong thing.
Grand Inquisitor.
Reva hesitates to kneel in front of Vader because this triggers her back to that moment Anakin towered over her when she was a youngling during Order 66. Rogan's freighter returns to Jabim, and now we see more of its muddy surface, trails of runoff trickling down into sediment pools. Later, the Grand Inquisitor tells Reva that they are leaving her where they found her, in the gutter. And this sinkhole base is literally a muddy runoff gutter. When they land, Leia rushes over to Tala, who's chatting with Corran and his mother. You remember them, they were the refugees Haja helped escape Dayu in episode 2. Now, the character Corran is actually included among the credits of this episode, actor Indy DeRoche, implying that he might be a bit more significant. He could be, or at least be based on, Legends character Corran Horn, biological son of Jedi Valen Halcyon.
That would be cool.
Actually appears on the wall of the same base and back in the Mapuzo safe house of episode 3. According to the Legends continuity, Corran Horn was born in 18 BBY, which would make this kid the right age. And in those stories, Corran would go on to be one of Luke Skywalker's first students after the Battle of Endor. Now, these these expanded universe stories were
That would
classified
be
as no
cool.
longer canon when Disney took over the franchise in 2015, but many of these stories are still beloved by many folks at Lucasfilm, thus all these Legends details making their way into these Disney Plus shows. All these names from the comics, and in Boba Fett, The Witches of Dathomir, eventually all the best stuff from the EU I think is just going to be official Star Wars canon anyway. Obi-Wan learns how to make it off of Daiyu and is now wanted by the Empire. Meanwhile, we see a droid with an astromech head and then thick hips. Passing out food. I'm guessing my man Babu Frick might have made a pair, and I am not complaining. There is another astromech droid that rolls around this base, but this is not R2-D2. R2 was on Alderaan for all of this.
Yep.
Obi-Wan sees the wall that is covered in Jedi markings, all in Orbesh, the Jedi Order sigil in the center, of course, but in the top left, there is no death, a line from the poem of the Jedi Order, in which the verse is, there is no death, there is only the Force. Also across the top, big letters, be with you. Beneath it, smaller, may the Force be with you. It seems like people just write that everywhere. To the right of those, directly above the sigil, the name Jin Altis. That's the name of the Altesian Jedi Purge survivor from the Legends books like Children of the Force. His name was also on the wall of the Mapuzo safe house. And in the middle left of screen, large letters, Corwin Shelvey. That's another Legends character, actually from the 1993 role-playing game, a character who joined the Jedi Order after the Purge. To the right of that, Tiberius, which could be Tiberius Anderlock, who is from the expansion pack to the game from 2003, Star Wars Galaxy's Empire Divided. To the right of that, beneath the sigil, the phrase,
Man,
"The
that
light
game.
fades, but it's never forgotten," presumably another message from Quinlan Voss. Above that, to the lower right of the sigil, Valen Halcyon, who I mentioned before, a name also from the Mapuzo safe house, the Legends Corellian Jedi from the X-Wing Rogue Squadron comics. At the bottom, on the far left, there's something falls. Then the bottom middle, the name Roganda Ismarin, another Jedi whose name also appeared in the Mapuzo safe house, an Alderaanian Jedi survivor of the Purge, also from the Children of the Force novel. And then on the bottom right, the words only strength. There are also a few initials scattered throughout this wall. In the middle, there's MF, which has got to be Mace f***ing Windu. You also might just say motherfucker. And then to the upper right of the words only strength is EC. Might be Eth Koth if he forgot to spell his last name. Now here, Obi-Wan also finds his crate that is filled with lightsabers. Remember, carrying around a lightsaber at this point is pretty much a death sentence for any Jedi who's trying to hide in society, so it makes sense that they would just give them up like 3D glasses outside of a movie. It makes a bit less sense no one thought to grab one of these to fight off the invading stormtroopers, but oh well. As for which Jedi these lightsabers belong to,
They more likely would have
no
killed
one in
themselves
particular. I was
with it,
thinking
but
that
still.
long, thin one on the far left looks like Maul's, or maybe one modded to be a single-bladed lightsaber, but it's not exact. The fourth one from the left has a long ridged grip like Qui-Gon's did,
Yeah.
but again, that's definitely not exact when you put them side by side. Remember, these would not be any of the lightsabers of the Jedi the Empire caught or killed. Those were either burned outside of the temple or
Yep.
put on display in the Fortress Inquisitorius. I checked against Quinlan Voss's lightsaber, Cal Kestis' lightsaber, Caleb Doom's lightsaber, but by the way, that wouldn't make sense because Kanan kept his and Rebels. Some are saying some of these lightsabers looked like the tapered hilts of Adi Gallia's lightsaber or Barriss Offee's lightsaber, but put any of these side by side and they are clearly not matches. I really just think these are all spare anonymous lightsabers. They didn't put any familiar ones in there, but let me know if you recognize any. I think the
Yeah,
one
no.
interesting detail about
The only
this
one
is
that stood out to
Obi-Wan
me was
picks up
kind
the
of
one lightsaber
the
with the simplest
Qui-Gon
design.
one.
Clearly the oldest of these, the most scuffed up. That's a saber of a carpenter. I think it's an indicator that there was someone far older than Obi-Wan who
Ow.
made it through this path. Maybe the Master, who is currently smuggling Grogu to safety. Evil Lola shuts the hangar doors and Obi-Wan tells them Vader is on his way.
It's not her, it's Vader. He'll attack next. He hasn't the patience for a siege.
And we flash back from Obi-Wan to the memory, proving that this is a memory shared between both Vader and Obi-Wan. The Force is bringing them together to dwell on this particular moment. Here, Obi-Wan instructs,
A Jedi's goal is to defend life, not take it.
Mercy doesn't defeat an enemy, Master.
yes, Anakin does not think in terms of the sanctity of life, only his present memory and how best to defeat them, which is what makes him so corruptible. The Devastator releases 2 transports, and we get this great shot of the Devastator as its dagger-shaped hull pierces the planet of Jabeem in the background like a knife cutting into a tomato. One of the Jabeem stowaways is actually a cameo by Christina Ariel, host of the Star Wars High Republic show. It seems like the show got a lot of Star Wars influencers to make cameos. Like, what do I gotta do? Don't you love me? No? Okay, fine, I get it. I love how we get this little flash of a Trandoshan family touching their heads together, which is nice because every other time we see Trandoshans are kind of assholes. Over by the back to tank where Obi-Wan spent last episode healing, he reviews Bail Organa's holo message.
I know we said no communication, but your silence worries me. If he's learned of the children, if I don't hear from you soon, I'll head to Tatooine. Owen will need help with the boy. I pray you're safe, Obi-Wan. Both of you.
Jesus, come on, Bale. Speaking of bit of code, who knows who's gonna find this? The guy really needs to delegate this stuff to a Fulcrum agent. Get Ahsoka on the line, please. Tala tells him about her defection after following orders on Gorel, slaughtering 4 families of 14 Force-sensitive people, 6 of them children. Gorel is actually an Outer Rim planet in the Lothal sector that shows up a few times in Rebels. Tala reveals a series of notches inside her blaster holster, one for every Force-sensitive she gets through to safety. And if you count those notches, there are definitely more than 14. I counted like 16 or 17, showing that for Tala, no amount of saved Force sensitives will be enough for her. As they gear up for battle, Roken carries a bowcaster with a similar curved bow and knobbed ends as the bowcaster that Chewie carries. Obi-Wan decides to try to negotiate with Reva, and he calls out the fact that she knew that Vader was Anakin, something that should have been private information, and he realizes,
The night of Order 66, you were a youngling. That's how you knew you saw him.
And we flash back to that night. The background shows that young Reva and her friends are really at the far end of that raised walkway, the direction they were running in at the end of that scene in episode 1.
Met
now we
only
learn
with
that in those
Anakin.
doorways on the other end was Anakin cutting them off. One of those kids who gets struck down is actually the same actor who played the youngling in the Amber Stasis in the Fortress last episode, confirming that that was one of Reva's friends, and she has to see his young corpse every day. Reva says,
I played dead, hid with the bodies, felt them go cold.
a brief shot shows Reva lying on the ground, her training helmet still wobbling. It's just heartbreaking to see all of this, and we see far more of the slaughter here than the Master Anakin kid in Revenge of the Sith, who, by the way, I just learned from an interview with that actor now as a young man. He said that as a kid, he stepped back in fear because Hayden Christensen said boo when they shot that scene.
Yeah.
Isn't that sweet?
I knew that one.
But she doesn't want his help and gives the blast doors the Qui-Gon treatment, leading to a shootout where, when you notice, stormtroopers are taken down with a single blaster hit, but it takes Obi-Wan 3 whacks of his lightsaber to take down the more heavily armored Purge Trooper. Clearly people who worked on the show, played Jedi Fallen Order, and I appreciate that. Ned B uses the kind of blaster actually used by the battle droids during the Clone Wars. It's awesome to see this guy operate. He throws a stormtrooper up in the ceiling, throws another one 20 feet backward, but Tala and Ned B get hit, and Ned B spends his final moments shielding Tala. It
Actions
is so
speaking
sad, but it gives her
louder than
just enough
words.
time to activate a thermal detonator and shoot the controls on the door so
All back to
Obi-Wan's on the
episode
other
3.
side.
May the Force be with you.
Now, while of course John Williams gets a lot of praise for his music, as he should, Natalie Holt did most of the composing on the show, and here you can hear her violin music so heartbreaking, reminding us a lot of the violins that we heard in Loki. And of course the thermal detonator, first named in Return of the Jedi by 3PO in Jabba's palace. Vader, meanwhile, flashes back again to their sparring session.
There's no way out, Master. Admit you are beaten.
It's over.
And because it's a shared memory, Obi-Wan answers to it by saying it's over, as if he is talking to the memory, responding in a kind of dialogue with the memory. And you probably got how back in that memory, Anakin was hacking repeatedly at Obi-Wan's lightsaber, wearing him down as the Master knelt, mirroring Luke hacking at Vader's lightsaber while Vader was kneeling in the same position in Return of the Jedi. Obi-Wan hands over his weapons to Haja.
You want to tell me how you're gonna fight without a weapon?
There are other ways to fight.
Yes, this echoes what he later tells Han Solo in A New Hope as the Death Star beams in the Falcon.
You can't win, but there are alternatives to fighting.
So Obi-Wan surrenders
God,
to
I
Reva,
love
and
it,
the shot
man.
frames the two of them so that the heavy gun is pointed directly from Reva to Obi-Wan's head. He says,
You're not bringing him to me. I'm bringing him to you.
he offers for them to end it together, and Reva says,
What makes you think you won't see it coming?
Because all you see is me.
Obi-Wan knows in this moment the memory his thoughts are currently dwelling upon is being shared by Vader. So he assumes that since his thoughts are being consumed by Vader, Vader's thoughts are consumed by Obi-Wan. And from here we jump back again to them sparring.
There. Your weapon's gone. It's over.
Your need for victory, Anakin, it blinds you.
Yeah, some of the instrumentation there definitely evoked John Williams' Battle of the Heroes, the staccato horns playing under Anakin's opening charge during their duel on Mustafar. You also notice Anakin does that awesome behind-the-back saber twirl flourish that he uses on Geonosis in Attack of the Clones and while dueling Obi-Wan on Mustafar. Lola tries to attack Leia, or just like gets in her face, but rather than smashing it like other people would, Leia digs in and finds a restraining bolt under one of its flaps and removes it. Now, of course, restraining bolts are recurring Star Wars tech used to deactivate or control droids. Luke had to remove a restraining bolt from R2 in A New Hope, but because Leia chooses not to smash Lola, she's able to use Lola's light to locate the correct cable. The transport takes off, but Vader drags it back down to the ground, a terrifying amount of strength. We have seen some Force-sensitive characters do this before, but chronologically, the most recent was Ahsoka trying to keep Maul from escaping in the final episode of Clone Wars before letting him go. Vader tears open the hull, and notice how when we cut to the inside of the ship to see it's empty, these bulkheads all have seats on them. Had people actually been on this ship, sitting in these seats, they would have gone flying. Vader did not care. But as we saw from the beginning of this episode, and now in Vader's entrance to this hangar, there are two freighters. So the refugees wisely fake out Vader with an empty one. Still, if you think about it, someone did have to pilot this. I assume it was that curvy astromech. R.I.P.
Yeah, probably.
As Vader watches the real freighter escape.
Another detail about that one too, because I was thinking about this during the episode and I didn't notice it until he pointed it out in this breakdown, was that I was like, you know, they had to wait on Obi-Wan to keep their thing going, right? Because they were like, we need that ship. They said we got people backed up, waiting for months to get out of here. If they had a backup freighter, why didn't they just keep that going? If you look at that shot, the wreck wouldn't have done that damage to that side wall of seats. The ones he tore off were torn off, but the ones on the other side that he didn't use the Force on were all destroyed. So this one was probably just in disarray to begin with, maybe not even functionable or capable of flying off into the atmosphere or even into the void of space itself, but it functioned enough to serve as a distraction. Because I was thinking about that. If they had two fully operational ships, that does kind of like break apart some of the earlier setup logic behind everything, but I think there's enough you can infer there on that this probably was not a fully operational ship to begin with. So, moving on.
Memory where Obi-Wan force snatches the lightsaber from his hand.
You're a great warrior, Anakin, but you'll need to prove yourself as your undoing. Until you overcome it, a Padawan you will still be.
A very interesting counterpoint to the famous exchange in A New Hope.
When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
So, as
and he
Vader
still doesn't
back on
acknowledge
his memory,
him then
he accepts
either.
that he still has not learned his old master's fuller lesson about his need to prove himself.
That also calls back to episode 3 when Obi-Wan gets away. It's like, I likened this in the previous episode to like Goku. Like, he wants to beat people at their fullest. Anakin, if he's beating a weakened Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan outside of his prime, it means nothing to him. Revenge means nothing to him because it just means he still has not actually surpassed his master. He hasn't bested his master. There's no reward. So instead, he lets him cling to life. Or actually, he was just kind of like confused. That was a loud strike of lightning. Holy shit. I don't know if y'all heard that. Holy fuck. But, yeah, like, and Hayden Christensen echoed that in this more recent interview. He wants to prove himself. He wants to get that acknowledgement. And he was confused by just how disconnected from the Force he was, how disconnected from the Obi-Wan he has been plotting against in his head this entire time. Like, it was a disappointment in that moment. So in a way, it works out in the long run, because the more he clings to life, the more he runs, the more he tries to flee, the more he's forced to kind of fall back into his old ways, to rely on his strengths, to reconnect with the Force. Kind of another anime parallel, a Sasuke situation with Itachi. It was like, cling to your wretched life, get stronger and face me, or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I like it. And it just makes it's one of the things that I speculated upon, and it just makes me feel a lot better that I think this episode really kind of hammered that in.
He's still the learner in that regard, but he has taken away some lessons when it comes to staying a step ahead of his opponent. Because at this point, it would seem like the episode would be over, but Reva Sneak Attack. This episode was actually co-written by Andrew Stanton, director of Pixar films like Finding Nemo and WALL-E. And one thing that filmmaker is really good at is making heroes pay up right when you think the story is over. Like, they can't just learn the lesson mentally, they have to actively prove it in some physical way. For example, even after Marlin finds Nemo, the father has to let his son son and Dory tell all the other fish stuck in the net to just keep swimming, risking losing his son again. And then in WALL-E, even after they return the plant to Earth and recharge WALL-E, Eve has to show an act of true love the way WALL-E did for her when she was cold and soulless. And now for Darth Vader, he must prove he was not blinded by a threat from behind as he was before. So this time he spins around and stops the attack. Actually, at first, he only uses the Force to repel Reva, as if she is not even worthy of a lightsaber duel. And in fact, you'll notice in this duel, he never draws his own blade. He only uses her half. After she ignites that second side of her saber, it actually nearly sears his mask. He slows down the helicopter spin, he snatches it, stabs it in half, tosses the other one to Reva, says, all right, let's do it. As they duel, I love it. Vader hurls a lit blade at her, which she deflects, but Vader uses that one move he learned from his sparring session with Obi-Wan and Force snatches the blade to force her to yield. And now Reva is back in that knelt posture, taking her back to her lower position as Vader towered over her when he attacked her during Order 66. The editing even syncs these two moments, the intercutting making it look like younger Reva is reacting to older Vader and older Reva is reacting to younger Anakin. And this is specifically synced when he impales her in the exact same spot that he did before, which actually might explain how she survives this. Whatever cybernetic implants that she got patched with before are now being seared now as opposed to any vital organs. And he says,
"Did you really believe I did not see it, youngling?"
And by it, Vader is referring to her hidden grudge against him. Reva assumed Vader didn't remember her, but he totally does. He remembers all the women and the children too. The Inquisitors are all fueled by anger and by vengeance and rage, waiting to take a swing at the big dog. It's not loyalty that keeps them in check, it is fear and vengeance. The Grand Inquisitor struts in alive and well.
Revenge does wonders for the will to live, don't you think?
He's right. Revenge certainly kept Maul fueled with the will to live after receiving far worse wounds. Also, Powans do have two stomachs, so really it was revenge and having some spare guts to lose. Actually, Rupert Friend hinted at this on Jimmy Kimmel.
And then you got stabbed, your character got stabbed.
Yeah.
Through the stomach.
One of them.
One of the stomachs.
Yes.
Okay, because your character has two stomachs, like a hippo or something
half
like
a
that.
cow, yeah.
They leave her behind in this gutter, and Reva regains her split lightsaber and finds Obi-Wan's holodisc with Bail Organa's message.
If he's learned of the children, I'll head to Tatooine. Owen, help the boy.
Now the message is damaged, so Reva probably can't see this is coming from Bail Organa unless she recognizes his voice, but in this moment she remembers talking to Owen in episode 1 and is now putting together that Obi-Wan was on Tatooine. He was there protecting the boy who lives under Owen's roof. Now it's unlikely at this point that she knows that the boy is Vader's son specifically, like she didn't know Leia was Vader's daughter, but she knows this boy is important to Obi-Wan and therefore she now has a way that she can get back to Vader. Obi-Wan assumed this episode that Vader would be so blinded by him that he'd miss the threat from Reva, but Vader saw it coming. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, was so blinded by Vader that he now missed the loose end of his closeness with Reva, exposing his original sacred mission to protect Luke. He senses it, but only too late.
Something's wrong.
Yes, echoing Obi-Wan sensing the destruction of Alderaan in A New Hope.
I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
And these final images take us back to where this series started, the Lars homestead on Tatooine. And we see it from the same exact hiding spot where Obi-Wan all the time would spy on it. And the final shot lowers on Luke Skywalker sleeping peacefully in his bed before we cut to black. But what I love about all this is the context of Obi-Wan even visualizing this imagery. Obi-Wan knows that his thoughts are linked with Vader. Obi-Wan can peer into Vader's present mind, Vader can peer into his. So now by even thinking about Luke on the farm, Obi-Wan is risking CCing Vader on these same thoughts and exposing Luke to danger. The cut to black even feels like Obi-Wan desperately hanging up on this conference call. Now, canonically, Vader is not supposed to know that Luke is on Tatooine. Like, he's not even supposed to know that he has a son or a daughter. Palpatine told him that.
I don't think they're actively connected. I just think they're conveniently thinking about the same thing, recalling the same memories. I think in some ways they are, but
Skywalker fired the kill shot and destroyed the Death Star. And only then does Vader realize, I have a son, and angrily smashes a glass of his observation deck. And that is years from now, obviously. So unless this series wants to retcon that moment, I really hope they don't, because it was awesome.
I don't think they're like one. I think they're only connected in the back to
Vader
tanks.
Discovering Luke on Tatooine, but Reva can certainly know and duel Obi-Wan as she attacks the Lars homestead. Hopefully, our man Obi-Wan will get some backup by a babysitter Force Ghost Qui-Gon Jinn with his very particular set of skills to turn Reva into a redemptive character. My hope is that she becomes a great Jedi, the way I class classify Qui-Gon Jinn to be. That's everything I spotted in episode 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Follow me.
That is one way to trigger so much of the fandom is to bring up Grey Jedi, man. Don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, it was a great breakdown. It was a really good episode, man. I loved all the visual storytelling throughout the entire episode and the way it paid off so much of the little details and hints and story beats from the previous episodes up until this point. I've seen some rumors about the length of the next episode, but I'm not going to get too hyped up into those. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how they close this all out. Now, like I was kind of saying, I don't think that Vader and Obi-Wan are sharing every single thought that they have. I really think, because the only times we ever saw them viscerally reacting to one another is in the Bacta tanks, which we know have some sort of like psychedelic properties that tune people in to their past, present, future, all that jazz and stuff while they're healing. And obviously these two Force beings who spent a fair share amount of time in Bacta would have those connections that they could make or breach. But I think this is just like an echoing of a shared memory that they had given this situation that just kind of surfaced in this moment. I don't think they were actively connected mind to mind, but both drawing upon the same lesson, the same point in their past. Because otherwise, like if that is the case, that he should know all of this. He should know about Leia, he should know about Bail, he should know about all of them. So yeah, I don't think that's what's going on. So I do think that was like one of those stretch speculations there for me. But I really liked the breakdown. I liked everything we called out in this, all little surviving Jedi. I was not surprised that none of those lightsabers actually connected to somebody, but I was kind of holding on to some hope that maybe some would be recognizable. But I really like this breakdown. Go support New Rockstars, and I'll see you guys next week with the final episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi and its breakdown. So guys, sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. Feel free to join us in our Discord. We could talk about it there as well. Links to that and all my socials in the description box below. Remember to check out my reaction. Full length is on Patreon, or if you become a member of the channel. Before we go, I want to shout out our channel legends: Mandy Sherritt, Ryan Karen, Jason Coleman, Philly Vane, Yori Korskov, Margaret Grace, Mary Bradley, Melita, Robert Anguiano, and Cal Kestis Nation. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. But that's it for this video, guys. I'll see you all next week. May the Force be with you always. Take care, everybody.